And after that, the way we'll sort of go is to initially take some inputs and suggestions from going from a more international perspective and then coming towards the local, and we'll be requesting the government representative to sort of chair the sessions. With this, Dr. Khalid, over to you. Thank you.
Oh, man, thank you so much. I hope I'm audible.
Dr. Khalid, your voice is a bit low. So if, yeah,
Okay, let me
it's
just.
fine now. Yeah.
It's, it's fine. Okay, how about now? Okay. Thank you so much, Ubad, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. This is the flagship report of SDPI, the Annual State of Renewable Energy. But I would admit that the state of renewable energy is not very good in Pakistan. Ubad mentioned two fronts. Both fronts have pros and cons in terms of renewable energy. For example, in the utility scale, we do not have so much to show. There is no progress. This is stagnant in the utility scale. And this makes sense. This makes economic sense because we have installed so much of a capacity that adding to this capacity, if that is renewable, would not make any economic sense. On the second front, that is the off-grid side, in terms of solar rooftop, we have progressed in exponential numbers. The growth has been phenomenal, but this exponential growth has caused a dilemma for Pakistan's planners. And that dilemma is that the national grid's demand is coming down. And due to this demand decreasing phenomena, now the planners, they are thinking to how to contain it, how to rationalize it. The progress that we made on that front now posing some challenges for the state of renewables as we speak now. What is the problem in Pakistan? Again, I always say that this is a multifaceted problem in Pakistan. It should start from the economic front. The planning should be an integrated economic planning, and then we should sort of plan our economic needs. What went wrong with Pakistan a few years back that we projected our economic numbers on a positive side that we couldn't achieve those numbers, and the plan made on those projections, those economic numbers, economic growth numbers, sort of caused this economic havoc or energy havoc in Pakistan. You talk about planning in terms of IGSAP, planning in terms of now I would not say TSAP because again transmission planning is on the low in Pakistan, but still we installed so much capacity that now we are from accessibility crisis to this affordability crisis, and electricity prices are so high that people started to take the matter in their own hands and started to install the solar PV rush. But my take would be following. Pakistan needs to first decide that Pakistan should not invest on expanding this capacity further, but still in the pipeline we have so many in a meeting last evening, there was a discussion that around 400 to 600 megawatts is in the pipeline. So if that comes along, again, the capacity payment trap or capacity trap that would worsen. So again, will not sort of attract more investments in the renewable side. What we can do is, and this annual state of renewable energy report also indicates maybe we need to think about some sort of an early retirement plan of some of the power plants, particularly those who have a very low utilization rate, so that the grid is capable of attracting more investments in terms of bringing more renewable energy to the grid. Second thing that I am very concerned about right now is that government is renegotiating the PPAs. And on one front, it is very good that it might sort of solve Pakistan's capacity charges or capacity payment problem. But the government sort of using the uniform criteria for the renegotiation for the fossil fuel-based power plants and the renewable-based power plants as well. Obviously, it makes sense that there should be no discrimination, but still, when the world is converging towards renewable energy, we need to think on this, that how we can bring more investments to renewable side, not discouraging it. Third thing that is very challenging for Pakistan is Pakistan's transmission system, which is not capable of keeping up with the uptake of renewable energy, particularly in terms of the national blackout that we faced in last year. Due to that transmission system, our renewable energy assets, they could not be fully utilized in optimal terms. Just to give you some numbers, in terms of NPMV, the non-project missed volume, we have increase that volume from around 1.9 billion rupees in fiscal year 2022 to around 39 billion rupee in 2024, which means that in the events of wind curtailment, when there is no evacuation options for the wind power plants, the burden lies on the consumer and it is increasing. But we need to look forward how we can sort of deal with this, particularly bringing investments to the transmission system, and maybe encouraging the investors to explore some of the futuristic trends that can be very good for Pakistan, particularly in terms of sector coupling that is in the report, and very good thing that maybe the renewable energy can be coupled with other sectors, particularly the green hydrogen. In the events of wind curtailment, we can sort of make use of that green energy to produce hydrogen, and that would have a very good economic case for Pakistan. In that regard, we can sort of not only boost our economic preferences, particularly keeping in mind the Uran Pakistan and the 5-year National Economic Transformation Plan, which projects again Pakistan's economic growth to 9%. Uh, so again, a dilemma for Pakistan. Another good thing about the report is that it make use of carbon markets as well. Carbon markets, very nice sort of initiative for Pakistan. But one thing in particular that suits Pakistan is this coal to clean credit initiative, which have two pilot projects, one in Vietnam and one in Thailand, I guess. They are using the utility of carbon credits to early retire some of the coal power plants. And this make good sense for Pakistan, that Pakistan has a very young coal fleet in Pakistan, which will sort of generate more carbon credits, and that option can be explored. And this early retirement, again, I would link it with renewable energy development, that when we retire these capacities, early retire these capacities, there would be more room for renewable energy. Third thing that I would like to highlight here is Pakistan's success story, and that is solar PV rush in Pakistan. Again, this success story is causing ripples in Pakistan's policy planning arena. But one thing we need to keep in mind that as this phenomena of solar PV and net metering increases, the burden on the consumers, those who cannot simply afford the luxury of solar PV, would increase on those consumers. So we need to sort of think about that as well. Maybe we can use solar PV and net metering in such a way that we can reorient subsidies that have been given to protected consumers in terms of providing solar panels to those protected consumers. And in that way, maybe we can rationalize our tariff and make it in a way that is more productive electricity demand, and that way maybe electricity demand of the national grid that would increase. And lastly, just food for thoughts, EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism. As we go along, the textile sector would come under the CBAM sector, CBAM fee. What is happening in Pakistan, if you see this CBAM exposure index, you'll find that Pakistan's national grid is 1.4 to 1.7 times more carbon intensive as compared to EU's national grid. So what would happen by 2030 if Pakistan is exporting 1 unit of anything to EU, and that cost around 100 euros, it will be increased to 140 euros if the manufacturer kept on taking electricity from the national grid. So we need to decarbonize our national grid as well. Maybe CTBCM is one thing that comes in mind when it comes to energy reforms, particularly not only for Pakistan's circular debt woes, Pakistan's transmission sector worries, but keeping the sustainability and export competitiveness in mind. So keeping all these together, Pakistan's annual state of renewable has some concern, has some challenges, but it is the way forward that we continuously keep the state of renewable energy in Pakistan and in the globe in mind and plan our development priorities in that way, so that our plans, our development priorities or economic growth projections, they are in line with world projections, so that we do not have this crisis that where we plan for a very short term with short-sighted policies, and then we get ourselves in a trap that is a capacity trap, that is affordability trap, or maybe sustainability trap. Lastly, one thing that we need to make sure that these renewables uptake, particularly on the off-grid sense, they should be inclusive and they should have some sort of a subsidized rates for those who cannot simply afford these. So my take would be that make economic policies aligned with the energy policies and make energy policies aligned with the economic policies. Better understanding the landscape or the state of renewable energy, for which this report is a very good reference. Looking forward to a very good discussion, maybe critique on the chapters as well, but still we want to make it in a sense that that is aligned with Pakistan's economic priorities, but still making a case for renewables. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Khalid. You have provided a very comprehensive overview of where the renewable energy sector of Pakistan currently stands, and also sort of providing the food for thought on what needs to be done on various fronts, including the economics, including the market reforms, including even the transitioning away from the pretty fossil fuels to use of different financing instruments such as coal to green credit initiatives, ETMs, and how this all sort of very closely links with. Again, the renewable energy debate in Pakistan extends beyond just its environmental need to more of its very strong economic case as well, especially given the export compliances. With the CBAM carbon border adjustment mechanism coming in. So, yeah, something that really makes a strong economic case. It's not we haven't been dealing strongly with the and on the environment side. So thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, for setting a very good scene. And I believe this is where we sort of initially go towards international experts that have been working. I mean, definitely I'll initially come to Farhan from Irina, then to Naila, but Naila also have worked a lot on the case of Pakistan as well. So, but initially coming to Farhan, thank you so much for joining us today as well. So, in 2025, if we look at generally, because again, Irina looks at the global perspective a lot as well. So, if there are any particular key trends to watch for the renewable energy industry in developing countries, I mean, South Asia, if, more specifically, and how important these implications or how relevant are these trends for the case of Pakistan, given some of the points that Dr. Khalid has just very recently highlighted as well. I mean, Pakistan is observing a very record rise in its off-grid solar PV. That is an opportunity, but at the same time, that's also challenge. So if any of the other countries have experienced similar examples, and uh, how Pakistan should position itself to get the most advantage out of it as well. And also, if you would like to sort of highlight, respond to any of the points made by Dr. Khalid as well. So yeah, once again, thank you so much for joining us, and with this over to you.
Thank you very much, Abed, and thank you to STPI for inviting me to speak on these very important topics. And also thank you to Dr. Khalid for setting the stage up so nicely. So I'll try to be brief because you've asked a couple of different questions, and so let's see. But please stop me if I'm going over time a bit. But before I get into what we're expecting, for 2025, let me backtrack a bit and provide some global context on where we are today. So, which will help us understand where we might be heading this year. So, I work specifically on tracking energy transition financing, and just on that particular area, we see that every year, global investments in the energy transition are breaking new records. So, in 2023, investments in renewable energy, in energy efficiency, in electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, battery storage, green hydrogen you mentioned, collectively investments in these sectors exceeded $2 trillion. As you would expect, 90% of these investments are going to advanced economies in North America and Europe, and large emerging economies like China, India, and Brazil. So On the other side, you have more than half of the world's population living in 150 developing countries that receives just 10% of these investments. So Pakistan is among them, and the disparity is huge. And I think we're well aware of why this disparity exists. I think one of the key reasons is, I mean, in Pakistan, you're much more familiar with what the issues are. But one holistic reason for this is the high cost of financing. And as you know, the risk premiums in the developing world are much higher. And in the last few years, we've had tremendous macroeconomic uncertainty, a lot of geopolitical tensions that are ongoing. And these have made matters even worse because countries are already grappling with inflation, currency depreciations. You've had huge influx of debt servicing costs, and at the same time, the fiscal budgets have shrunk, right? So when it comes to Pakistan, at IRENA, we did an analysis last year, and we estimated that between 2022 and 2024, the weighted average cost of capital for utility scale solar PV projects would go up by 5 percentage points. So it was around 15% back then, and we estimated that it would go up to 20%, which, as you know, is detrimental for project economics and probably explains why we haven't seen much on the utility scale side. But despite these challenges, we've seen Pakistan become, as it was mentioned, one of the largest markets for solar in 2023 and particularly 2024. And again, you know better what's going on there, but from our side, I think on one side, you've had this unreliable and expensive electricity from the grid, which has driven businesses and households to seek alternate solutions. And at the same time, you've had this huge shift, huge decline in the price of solar modules. And that's triggered by this global oversupply, particularly in China. And Pakistan's taken up advantage of this opportunity. And since we track investments, we saw a huge uptick for solar investments. So in 2024, we estimated that about $16 billion were invested in Pakistan's solar sector, driven primarily by off-grid, which is which is quadruple the levels of previous years on average. So against that context, when we look at 2025, there are two things that I'd like to mention. One is I think we can all expect very safely that solar module prices are expected to remain quite low, given the global oversupply. We've had a lot of tariffs on Chinese solar exports, particularly from the EU and the US. And I think for those manufacturers that are now facing these tariffs and have this overcapacity, they'll be looking at Pakistan as a major market. And the demand is there, as you know. So I think we can continue to see some growth in this segment. And perhaps later we can discuss, it wasn't mentioned, I think, before about whether Pakistan plans to be a part of the supply chain, whether Pakistan plans to manufacture its own solar PVs. And if that's something that there's any work going on, I would really love to hear about it. But we have some thoughts as well on IRENA side, and I'm happy to share that. But at the same time, I think we'll see the ongoing geopolitical tensions continue. We have these high interest rates since 2021, and these will persist, we expect. And you know, Pakistan's own challenges with the distribution companies. So I think on the utility scale side, we don't see any significant projects coming online unless significant policy interventions are made. I did want to quickly, sorry, I know I'm probably over time, but just green hydrogen was mentioned in context of sector coupling. And I think it's important to mention here that we've been tracking investments in this sector, and we've seen a sharp increase since 2019 up till 2023. But in 2024, we saw a decline. And you're probably aware why this is, because there were a lot of announcements, there were a lot of MOUs signed. There was a lot of momentum behind the sector, but a lot of projects did not materialize because there were simply no offtake agreements. At IRENA, we've recently done a survey of 70 institutions, well, project developers, financial institutions, some EPC contractors, to understand what are the risks different risks that these projects are facing. And the largest risks are market risk, particularly offtake, and export risk. So I think if Pakistan's looking at producing green hydrogen, it's important to analyze, can it be produced at, in an economical fashion, but also is there a market for it locally? And if not, is Pakistan planning to export this? And then all those risks need to be contended with, especially given the current trade conflicts and so on. So I'll stop here. I know you had another question on off-grid solar, but I think I've touched on it.
Let's come to it a bit later as well. Thank you. No, thank you so much, Ram. That's really insightful, especially the points that you mentioned. Yeah, fully understanding that on the utility scale, there have been a lot of, even going beyond the geopolitical tensions, there have been a lot of policy inconsistencies, institutional challenges, regulatory challenges within the Pakistan that have actually not provided a very enabling environment for the investors to come in the large renewable energy space of Pakistan. Especially we sort of tried, I mean, coming up with some of the auctions of up 600 megawatt solar power projects. We didn't receive any potential interest from the external investors as well. And also, but at the same time, when we talk about that, if we transition from these large utility scale towards some small scale or small quantum projects, then as the case of K-Electric, we did receive some positive response on that end as well. But yeah, I believe it's fully agreeing with your points, and thank you for highlighting that green hydrogen angle as well. So, I mean, with this coming to Miss Naila from Agora, thank you so much, Naila, for joining us. You have worked again a lot in in Pakistan on Pakistan's renewable energy sector as well. So, taking lead from the discussion that we have been having, these institutional weaknesses and some of the regulatory challenges. We even had some of the bureaucratic inefficiencies that have actually hindered the implementation of our renewable energy policies in Pakistan as well. I mean, so perhaps we have a two-sided question from you. I mean, based on now your experience working with the Agora Energy Window, what proven strategies from the global energy transition could actually strengthen Pakistan's institutional capacity, and what gaps in policy execution needs further research to ensure a long-term success as well. And also, I mean, if we look at some of these inconsistent regulations and some limited private sector participation, if you can sort of shed some light from the international markets that could guide future research, and also looking a bit on the financing angle as well around the renewable energy economics, around the renewable energy financing. If and any other areas that you want to sort of respond to, taking lead from the discussion or the points highlighted by Dr. Khalid and as well as Farhan as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Naira, over to you.
Thank you, Bad. Well, I think the energy landscape dynamics in Pakistan and forces that are driving the energy transition are very different from what we see in global north. I mean, in the north, institutions are actually driving the transition, and we see more like a top-down approach catalyzing change. The governments are more invested in catalyzing change via clear mandates, consistent policies, strong and stable regulatory environments that ensure investment security and boost investor confidence. And then they have these transparent procurement mechanisms and targeted interventions and incentives to influence users' preferences, and also competitive retail markets and well-aligned infrastructure planning. And all these pillars then work in tandem to drive the transformation. And if we compare this to Pakistan, the dynamics of energy transition are very different here, particularly in the light of the recent solar surge that is happening here. The transition is largely consumer driven and people centric, and these bottom up agents are reshaping the energy sector as a response to the long standing systemic failures of the centralized energy sector in terms of unreliable supply, load shedding, excessive losses, and rising tariffs. And the institutions, on the other hand, they remain weak, making the renewable energy drive full of conflicts and struggle. And these weaknesses are more evident in our planning and procurement stages, generation and grid planning, etc. And one of the deeper issue which continue to be IGSEP, which continues to be anchored in outdated assumptions and allocates a disproportionately small share to renewable energy. And then, of course, this creates a entire domino effect on other energy frameworks. For example, TCEP, it is premised on IGSEP and cannot be aligned to support higher renewable integration until IGSEP prioritizes renewables. And adding to these challenges, then we have this absence of a structured fossil fuel phase out strategy. So while the global north has implemented like carbon pricing, emission trading schemes, and legally binding net zero transition commitments, Pakistan lacks a clear regulatory framework for retiring fossil fuel assets and continue to depend on coal and imported LNG, which contradicts our commitment towards renewables and also exacerbates our economic vulnerability. So overall, our planning remains like static and misaligned, and the institutional inertia and the structural inefficiencies, they are holding back the progress. And so what is needed is a fundamental realignment of energy planning, market structure, and institutional frameworks. Which if realigned could, and of course renewable financing, which if realigned could transform the energy sector, and also turn this ongoing solar influx into a more structured and long-lasting development.
Yes, thank you so much, Naila, for highlighting the point, especially around the dynamics. Yeah, and I would also sort of try to reiterate this, that this is really important, that the solar rush that we have been seeing in Pakistan and the energy transition that is happening is all consumer driven. And if we look at again on the regulatory side, the challenges persist. On the policy and the documented side, the challenges persist. Is very well pointed out regarding the IGSAP. We have seen some of the iterations and a lot of very varying targets within the document around the renewable energy. We see a lot of issues coming from the space that, I mean, a lot of it is in a very committed space and not sort of following these cost principles in its true sense as well. And yeah, so I believe one very key point coming out of here is also sort of, as I mentioned, is the realignment of planning. That's really going to remain very important. So I mean, now with this, I believe we do have a very good scene with which we can sort of move towards two key trends as well as two experts, Irfan Sab and Ahasab, and then we'll be coming towards Akil Sab as the panel chair. So Irfan Sab, you have been again working at the renewable energy space for now quite long with the wind energy power generators at the advisory spaces with the Chinese stakeholders as well as other private sector institutions as well now. But looking at sitting in 2025, I mean, how do you actually see the way forward for the renewable energy sector from here? I mean, if we might not see some very good developments happening at the utility scale, more probably. So perhaps looking more towards small scale, micro scale solutions, looking more towards a community driven transition. But yeah, again, feel free to respond to any of the points. But yeah, we really look forward to listening more of a private sector perspective, as well as what you think should be the key contours of renewable energy development for Pakistan in 2025. And if you also sort of see any of the key market trends happening that needs to be analyzed more, that we can bring in our research as well as advocacy and communication. So yeah, please feel free to respond in those areas as well. Over to you.
Thank you, Ben. Well, energy transition has to take place. There's no doubt about that. From conventional to renewable. We should remember, however, that renewable energy is a distributed generation resource. So it should be best handled locally and not by the center. That's the first thing. Now, what we have been doing here, that we have been putting up large renewable energy projects, wind in Sindh and solar mostly all over, and transporting this energy from one side to the other through transmission and distribution systems, which are very weak and they cannot handle this renewable energy or intermittent energy. And this has resulted into, huge revenue loss and national loss for the government. Dr. Khalid Walid was saying that last year they paid almost 40 billion rupees in NPMB. That is for the energy which was not extracted, which was not used. So it is a clear, absolute loss to everybody. So this should be avoided. And this can only be done by going for some new methods of generating and transporting energy. We got into this issue because of our policies of having large-scale renewable energy projects and then giving this responsibility to NTDC to transport this energy. Though in the beginning, DISCOs should have done it, but I think for our DISCOs, this was also a tall ask, a big task in the beginning, and they wanted to avoid it, so NTDC has to take this. Now you said something about IGCEP. IGCEP, to talk about IGCEP and renewable energy, they are two different pair of shoes. IGCEP is being made by NTDC, and they can only think about putting up large projects and transporting huge amount of energy, but not solar or wind, because the network, what they have designed, is not for this purpose. So IGCEP should be excluded from this, and we should have some other company or organization which should be, planning for renewable energy transition. Now, coming to the issues here, I can speak about wind power projects more readily because I know the current scenario, what is happening there. Although we have not set up wind projects for the last 3-4 years now, but due to electricity becoming unaffordable, the industry is moving towards self-generation of RE. Considering that the textile industry has to export as well, and they should have substantial renewable input to export their products to Europe. And since all the wind power projects, they had 20 years contracts with the government, it was very difficult to get this output, curtailed output even to the industry. So the industry has started importing second-hand wind turbines, which are available for free in Europe. Only the transportation cost has to be paid. And they are putting them up with large-scale solar and BESS systems. Calculated payback period is 2 to 3 years. But these are very affordable. I think the tariff would be less than 20 rupees per kilowatt hour. And later on, after 2-3 years, it will drop to 10 rupees if the projects remain. So this is most of the industry in Sindh is doing. They have started doing it. People have set up individual wind turbines with solar and all that. This will again be a capacity trap because the government will have to pay the capacity for the plants that it has already set up. But I don't know who is planning there on the government side because they are setting up C5. What is the need of C5, 1200 megawatt nuclear power plant? You know, our Sindh wind power plant got into this curtailment issue because we have got two large nuclear power plants, K2 and K3, each generating 1100 megawatts. But they were also not fully loaded last year. I think the plant factor was 70%. So about 800 megawatts we could, from each of them we could get. 600 megawatt are still there. And that's why the wind had to be curtailed. Officially, we were told that it will be curtailed to up to 40%. We have 1845 megawatts of wind power projects. So at the peak, we'll be supplying only 1200 megawatts. That is in summer season this time. Or this could be even less because the industry is now vanishing. Industry is setting up its own renewable plants and there will be no load. So the curtailment of the wind this year will be more than in the previous years. So curtailment, we have checked in detail, is not only a revenue loss for the projects, it is not only a national loss, but it is also loss of life of the equipment we are using. The WPPs or the wind turbines, they are not designed for this curtailment. And therefore, you know, the blades are getting eroded, the pitch drives are getting damaged, and even the batteries are getting damaged. So this I can, you know, sort of confirm from the maintenance we are doing on a few wind power projects here. And studies have also been done in this regard. So we have projects of 20 years project term, and after 8 or 9 years, they are developing faults, which are mostly attributable to the curtailments which are being carried out. So our first thing should be that we should try to improve our network and increase the load and make electricity affordable that the industry doesn't run away from this. Now, coming to small-scale solar, we have 50 million people in Pakistan which are without electricity in the rural areas. Only 12 million in Sindh only. So for them, you know, financing solar or wind or renewables is very difficult. So there have been last time in STPI meeting, we discussed all that. And I would say that we should go for small scale solar, self-manufactured, self-financed, because financing is very expensive in Pakistan. And this can be done 100%. We share that. We should look into that as well. Now coming to the last point, which is PV solar. We have 43 gigawatts of installed capacity and only 6% utility scale, about 3 gigawatts of wind and solar. Germany has got 45 gigawatts of net metered PV solar out of their above 90 gigawatt of PV solar. Half of it is net metered. So they are setting up community grids, etc., and not loading everything on the grid, main grid. We should also think about this. For urban areas, we should go for community grids and let this PV solar, you know, function. It shouldn't stunt any progress there. We should find out ways and means so that we can put this up.
Agree. Yeah.
So this is all Perhaps I want to
Sure.
say now,
Yeah.
but later
Thank
on.
you. Thank you so much. Yes, Irfan sir, we do have a couple of questions on which we'll get back to you. But yeah, the points that you raised around some of the concerns that these wind power projects have, and then how they actually go beyond just the revenue loss to also the loss of the technical equipment that we have, is also one of the very key challenges as well. So, but before coming to a panel chair, Keel Saab, let me come to Ahad Saab, that I believe we have been discussing on the DG, but one very important angle that needs to sort of come in would be around the need for grid modernization in Pakistan for all the renewable energy uptake. I mean, agreeing partially with the point that Irfan Saab has made, that RE in itself is a decentralized concept, but yeah, with all the, I mean, given the landscape that Pakistan has for the energy sector with the long-term power purchase agreements, and we do have an existing grid. And there's, I mean, the whole solar PV uptake of the rush that is happening also needs to be in some way perhaps brought on to or to complement the grid as well. And also, so perhaps if you can sort of touch upon like how in depth should the grid modernized concept be included within the key pieces that SDPI is again undertaking, how we need to sort of perhaps look for more mobilization of towards the grid modernization side, and how this needs to also be bring in the discourse as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Ahad Saab has been working with the wind energy sector for quite long as well, especially in the RE sector for long, especially for the wind sector as well. So yeah, with this over to you, Ahad Saab. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, and Ramazan Mubarak as well. So with regards to grid modernization, I think one of the aspects that can potentially be tested or somewhat researched in the upcoming report can be the multi-complementarity of solar and wind with other aspects, especially small hydro, run-of-the-river hydro. That can probably be a very good solution for the intermittency problem. But in addition to this, I'll like to go back to when we were conceiving the first annual State of Renewable report. And we started off with sort of creating a case for renewables in the broader spectrum of sustainable development. So as a policy think tank, our role becomes very difficult because we have to create a non-technical version of whatever is being said and written into a sort of a non-technical version of that that should also create an awareness of the policymaker and also somehow make sense to them. So what my experience is, and of course with Irfan Saab sitting here, I will never claim I'm an experienced person. My experience with the policymakers is that they usually are more focused on the economic indicators. So whatever we say about the technical indicators, unless or until we sort of correlate them with the outputs of economic growth, it's very difficult to make a case. So whatever we are trying to do, if we link it somehow to investments, to exports, just like I think the textile sector was mentioned by Irfan Saab as well. This should be part of the report. And we tried to make it part of the report last time as well, but I think a more focused approach this time will really help. Similarly, when we started off with the annual State of Renewables, our focus used to be that we will link the annual State of Renewable with at least one SDG. For example, we did discuss linking it with, for example, the gender equality. Like what type of interventions will it have with that particular SDG? Just leaving apart the SDG related to energy, the other aspects that it is impacting, the renewable energy sector, how much jobs it is creating. So I think this will probably make more sense to the policymaker going forward. Another aspect I think which we can of course discuss is the EV uprising that we are expected to have with BYD already in Pakistan, and more companies are also looking at it. According to the recent reports we had from the SIFC. Uh, so I think this is something that we can link how renewable energy and the EV sector growth can sort of match up to each other. And right, I think if we go back to what was being discussed by Dr. Khalid at the very start, uh, we also have to look at the other side of the picture, that what is the real incentive behind renewable energy, whether it is only the profit, whether it is truly responsibility at the end of the generators, whether it is still the higher tariffs that we are paying. What type of differentiation has that competition in the wind tariff created in overall demand from the investors in this regard? This can also be one of the areas that we can sort of bridge, and the policy recommendation should be aimed at how we can continue the momentum we used to have in I think up till 2017, when I think internationally competitive bidding started with wind power. Another aspect, I think Umar has also mentioned it in one of the Q&As. I think it's a very good suggestion to sort of co-optimize generation and transmission. This is probably very important. Looking at the IGSEP in silo will never make sense. Looking at TSEP in silos will never make sense. We sort of have to create an integration between these two parameters, and then of course the planning will automatically start making more sense. And last point, I think I'll second Irfan Saab on the creation of the RE value chain within Pakistan. But maybe going for manufacturing is not that lucrative at the moment, but assembly might be better. But at least we should have the warehousing arrangement, because the type of the non-availability of spares and the type of issues we faced, especially during the import curtailment that the government issued in, I think, 2022-23. So that type of issues can be avoided that way. So these are
Yeah,
some of my suggestions for the upcoming
thank
SREC,
you.
and of course, maybe some of these can be done in the next one as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Some all very well noted points, and we'll sort of try to bring them in the annual state report to the extent possible. So I believe now coming to key stakeholder we have with us. Thank you so much, Akil Saab, for joining us. Akil Saab is chairing the panel today. So I mean, taking lead from the discussions that have happened, especially the points highlighted with definitely by some of our international experts, as well as Dr. Khalid's presentation. How do you see? I mean, we just have a one-pointer question from you, and you can sort of respond to any of the points that you want to. That how is now government sort of seeing the renewable energy development in Pakistan? Definitely, there are a lot of supporting policies on that front, but especially now looking at the 2028, 2025, we fully understand that sort of PV of especially the off-grid is a very positive development happening in Pakistan, but we fully also align with the fact that it is also causing some of the challenges as well. So, but in the whole trends and the way the sector is moving, uh, how do you see the renewable energy developments happening, and if there are any new programs or any other points that you want to sort of respond on to? So, yeah, thank you so much for joining us and with this overview. And after you will be sort of also taking the another round and the questions that people have posted in the chat as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bharat. I hope I am audible. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to STPI for inviting me today. It was very interesting to listen to the experts, their thoughts and views, and they all of them mentioned very pertinent uh, views and what we are facing in Pakistan with regards to renewable energy. Uh, Dr. Khalid Saab rightly said that for the when we talk about renewable energy, and the future of renewable energy in Pakistan, there are lots of challenges, but at the same time, there are many opportunities which we can foster and which can promote renewable energy development in Pakistan, and which can also accelerate the clean energy transition that the government is targeting in Pakistan. Uh, as it was rightly mentioned that one of the major issues we are facing right now, which is totally different what we were facing 10 years ago, is underutilized capacity. We have excess of power generation capacity, excess of power generation available, and the demand for electricity on the grid system is decreasing. One of the factors, and if we look at the different generation patterns and the electricity generated consumed in the last 2 years, solar is one of the factors, but even that decrease is very visible during the night time when the solar is not available. So that means one of the other reasons which comes in mind is the higher cost of electricity. That is, uh, uh, due to which the people are consuming, consumers are consuming less, and they are moving towards conservation of electricity. Uh, I think as the government, no doubt, renewables are the cheapest sources of power generation now, and government's priority is to increase the share of renewables in the grid. Not only in the grid, and that, in the last couple of years, it has been realized that even the distributed generation can play a vital role in serving the demand of for energy for the consumers, different segments of consumers, and the government has been supporting distributed generation, and going forward also will be supporting distributed generation. I think one of the major reason in the past for our multifaceted issues that we are facing, as Dr. Khalid Saab rightly mentioned, in the power sector, uh, has mainly been improper planning, unplanned capacity additions, without looking into the future prospects and pros and cons of those capacity additions. Uh, Lately, but we are on the path of uh, developing new capacity on the basis of IGCEP, and we are still on the learning curve from the first approved IGCEP to the draft that was submitted by NTTC in April last year, which is still being finalized in different quarters of the government. But the good thing is that, and this point was also highlighted by one of the speakers, that we need to get out of that thinking as thought process of we have certain uh, committed projects, and the planning needs to be done purely on certain criteria. One of them is the least cost criteria. So going forward, uh, uh, the government is of the view that even the projects which are in the development mode, which have gone into construction, no doubt there are certain financial obligations have been taken up by the investors, so they'll be processed and allowed. Otherwise, the projects which have not achieved financial close, and the other projects which are still in the earlier stages of development, they won't be taken in as committed, and the planning will be done purely on least cost criteria. Uh, while saying that, they might arise some requirement of thermal power generation because of technical constraints or technical requirements which are required to support the grid system in the middle of the country. Uh, Another thing, uh, the IGCEP also, if we most people must have gone through the IGCEP, that also provides the utilization of different power plants over the planning horizon period. So how much power plants, the thermal power plants will be utilized in the next 10, 15 years. So that information can also be used to to have a structured IPP retirement plan. If the IGCEP states that some of the power plants, thermal power plants, which are already 10, 12 years down in the or more than that in the operation phase, are not being utilized more than 20% in the next in the 5 years down the road. They can be early retired. That also provides an avenue for more share of renewables coming in the grid. But at the same time, the government has realized that there are certain actions that will be required to be taken, as you rightly mentioned, one of them being the augmentation and modernization of the grid system, in order to provide reliable and 24/7 uh, reliability of the grid system and power supplies to the consumers. The solar rush, that's a reality. Even no regulatory framework would be able to stop, because if you try to impose any restrictions on the consumers, they'll simply go behind the meter. And that's not the solution the government wants. So that is why the government is promoting distributed generation. We've seen a lot of more than 2.4 gigawatts of solar installation and net metering mode in 2024. And the figures we are getting in 2025, in the first 2 months, they are higher than that, which we have seen in last year. So the one way is to support this initiative and the consumers switching towards solar, but that also poses some difficulties for the grid operator and the operations of the grid and stability of the grid. For that, there's a need, and the government is also working on that, to add battery energy storage systems at the grid level that can support the continuous supply of electricity and provide some sort of backup. That will also reduce the curtailment, and that can be managed and can in fact remove the curtailment of wind power projects, so we can utilize the NPNV payments would go down, and the capacity, the cheaper energy can be fully utilized in the future. Apart from that, there are plans to utilize pump storage hydro, which we are trying to initiate some studies and find appropriate location where pump storage hydros can be developed, because they also provide stability to the grid, and they also cover the intermittency of renewable energy, the variable renewable energy generation. As one of the speakers rightly mentioned, that uh, the 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 one other thing that can be done is to structure our water flows in such a way that hydro like, sinks in with the renewable generation at the south, so the generation at north is synced with the generation at south, and that provides stability to the grid. So there are many initiatives which the government is taking and plans to take, all of which are targeted towards increasing the share. We might not see in the current IGSAP huge quantum of renewables being developed for the national grid, but certainly the share of renewables in different other segment, distributed generation, net metering, will still be increasing. And going forward, as new demand increases, as one of the speakers mentioned, EVs are coming. Charging infrastructure, the regulation have been set in place, and we are hearing every other day that many local companies and international firms are also making joint ventures for developing EV infrastructure. That will also increase the demand on the grid. And this is what the government is looking at, increasing the demand, which can pave the way for more renewables on the grid. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Akil Saab. Very extremely well explained points, and good to hear that the planning developments are moving in the right direction. We fully understand that definitely the government has some of the challenges of its own as well, but good to hear the recent developments that you have mentioned and the way we sort of are thinking is aligned. So, coming towards the next phase of discussion, again, come to speakers. I mean, one key question from all would be that. Uh, for the 2025, we just name a couple of areas that we really need to explore. I mean, so not talking about, the challenges or the solution, but the areas that Pakistan needs to sort of explore, and how those policy reforms can, and then we'll sort of try what SJP is going to do is sort of do a dedicated research around that and sort of try to come with a very sort of specified set of solution that can actually they provide. So just very briefly, 2 points that really needs to be explored in the context of Pakistan. But along with that, we have a lot of questions present in the Q&A. I'll sort of very quickly summarize, and if any of the speaker during the intervention wants to respond on that. So we have questions on three different fronts. Uh, I believe we have 3 to 4 comments that are on the same point. That is that we're talking a lot about the adoption of off-grid renewable energy, but it definitely is going to have a very strong toll on the or the impacts for the revenue of the discos or the consumers that are already connected to the grid. So they might not be, they are not sort of positively being impacted by that, because I mean, from on their end, the prices are increasing. The secondly is, and I believe perhaps if Farhan you want to sort of respond to, is that with the new US exiting the Paris agreement and the environment, I mean, it's gonna take the environmental sustainability angle is gonna take the some of the tools, especially when you talk about the export compliances such as the CBAM regulation, because it's gonna again US exiting the Paris agreement might sort of have impact on towards the European countries as well. I mean, so it's not just the CBAM, but other countries coming up with some of these regulations. So if these regulations are removed, it's eventually gonna remove that push uh, of the carrot and stick approach that is here as of now for the industry, especially the export-oriented sector of Pakistan, such as textile, to shift towards low carbon development. Then we have again a couple of questions around the demand side management and how important it is for optimizing consumption patterns. And last and not the least, Irfan Saab sir, will be coming to you that you have talked about. I mean, we haven't discussed the batteries in detail. So if anyone wants to respond to, like the solar PV or the e-waste coming in either from the solar PV 10 years down the road and 20 years down the road, as well as battery. So we really need to come up with the circular economy policy that can actually sort of address these solutions as well. But before I think coming to Farhan, let me sort of come to Dr. Khalid if he wants to sort of respond to any of the questions or any of the points that speakers have mentioned. But I'll just request everyone to be since we just have hardly 15 minutes left, if you can just be a little brief, like 3 minute interventions at maximum. Yeah, that would be really good. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Khalid.
Well, thank you so much. Those are very, very difficult questions, particularly the CBAM one and the geopolitics around it. What I think is maybe in this current scenario, maybe Trump likes the CBAM idea because he wants to put tariff on trade. So the major crux or the main motivation behind CBAM is how to promote the local industry, because EU has carbon taxation and they do not want to get the export competitiveness or competitive level of their domestic industry get lower. So that's why they implemented this CBAM fee. Maybe it doesn't have anything with environment or climate change, but it is more on the export competitiveness side. So I'm sure that this will go on. So we need to plan in that way. Secondly, maybe what are different way forwards or what to put in our next report that might be more related to financial side as well. We need to sort of give leverage to renewable energy, particularly standpoint of the financial side, maybe green risk sharing facilities that can be explored, particularly align with the MEGA frameworks or the Sino-Shore frameworks, how to bring more investments to it. Maybe guarantee facilities that can be insured as well. Just to give you an example, the risk amount that Sino-Shore charges, it has almost 10 times increased. So keeping that risk in mind and keeping the stranded asset that these coal power plants, particularly under CPAC, that they have become, we need to sort of have this sector-specific policies, particularly in terms of risk mitigation. Second thing that can be a very economic-oriented thing for Pakistan as well, how to reorient the subsidies. In last year's federal budget, we provided around 1.5 trillion rupee subsidy to the overall, and majority of it, almost 80% of it, in terms of the power sector. So we need to reorient these subsidies. To reorient these subsidies, we need to sort of have not have this national uniform tariff. Maybe we need to have tariff reforms, and for that, we need to again think about these protected consumers, which are around 50 to 54%. For that, solar PV is a very good thing. Maybe providing subsidy to solar PV and providing them to the protected consumers. In that way, we can ensure the inclusivity of it, and we can ensure that these subsidies are reoriented from fossil fuels to renewable energy as well. So these were the few points.
Thank you. Yeah.
Looking forward to other experts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid. So yeah, again, thank you for responding to the question. And the 2 point is being financial. How do we get the financial leverage? How do we explore the new financing instruments such as green risk trading you talked about, and up to reorientation to of the subsidies as well. So yeah, coming back to Farhan, if you want to sort of add on to any of the points or respond to any of the questions. So yeah, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Abed. So completely agree with Dr. Khalid on the CBAM and the US exiting the Paris Agreement issue. But one thing I will say about that is that the last time US exited the Paris Agreement is when you had all these countries committing to net zero targets. That happened exactly when US exit the Paris Agreement. So we can talk about what those net zero targets mean, and you know, but I guess the broader point is, and we're all quite concerned about this, but the broader point is that it does not help that the US has left the Paris Agreement. But as long as there's an economic case there, and it is there, I think this transition will continue. Now, one point I do want to touch on is the need for, I guess, the need for letting this off-grid solar PV development continue, because again, I will reiterate that this is a huge opportunity for Pakistan to deploy energy very rapidly in a very affordable manner to millions of people. There's huge room for growth there. Just for context, if you look at South Africa, the grid has a total of 58 gigawatts of capacity for 60 million people. And in Pakistan, you have about, I think, 50 gigawatts of grid capacity for 236 million people. So there's a huge opportunity here, especially because the prices are so low because of the global oversupply. So Pakistan should take advantage of that. But I think in the long run, I do agree that Pakistan should look at becoming part of the supply chain by developing some local manufacturing. And we already see factories emerging in India and in Turkey, in Southeast Asia from before. So I think these countries want to enjoy the socioeconomic benefits of having local manufacturing, the job creation, the income growth, the additional energy security. And I think Pakistan should look into that. And I think that's where maybe SDPI can play quite an important role. So I think it would be very interesting if SDPI looked at how can Pakistan leverage its local capacities and resources to establish itself as a manufacturer, and what part of the supply chain should it focus on? I think assembly was mentioned, but also not just solar PV, but also maybe look at battery manufacturing. I know India is leading in South Asia, but I think Bangladesh has announced a lithium-ion battery factory, which is, I think, expected to be commissioned this year. And then, looking at the demand for these and the export demand, the local demand, the material requirement, the labor requirements, and so on. So I think if SDPI did this sort of analysis, it could be very, very interesting. So I'll stop.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Farhan. Very well noted points, both around the off-grid continuation and the localization angle that you mentioned. Thank you. So coming to Naila, just sort of again highlighting two of the questions that are there around the grid stability and the storage. So if you can sort of respond to it, like what particular areas could Pakistan prioritize to develop a more resilient energy infrastructure? So that's actually one of the key questions. I mean, that is around renewable energy, handling renewable energy intermittency very effectively. So if in case you want to respond to it, and secondly, the same point, that what key priority areas should be perhaps we explore in the upcoming year as well. Thank you. Over to you, Naila.
Yeah, well, in general, to integrate a high share of solar and wind, what we need is a more flexible power system, right? And this could be harnessed through a combination of approaches such as demand side management, sector coupling, of course, storage and market liberalization, advanced forecasting tools. But what we need is we have to choose our own least cost combination of flexibility that also aligns with ground realities. And then then since solar PV prosumage in Pakistan is going to be a core part of our energy system, I think it is very important to rethink planning and infrastructure for this distributed and decentralized renewable energy scale up. And uh, encouraging battery adoption, selective smart meter rollouts, particularly in highly diffused solar PV diffused regions, strategic adjustments in net metering, which, for instance, could incentivize more PV penetration in high loss feeders and underserved regions, so that we could leverage the most benefits of this solar surge. And just on a final note, I think it is important to understand that the choices that we make today will determine whether Pakistan leads a sustainable future, or we face an unmanaged crisis-driven transition. So it is important to understand that the solar PV prosumage is now inevitable, and with this dramatic shift, the question should no longer be whether Pakistan's energy transition will happen. It is already happening.
Yeah.
And the real challenge ahead is whether our policies and plans recognize, support, and integrate this shift, or remain disconnected from a transformation that is
Thank you.
already
Very
well
well.
underway.
Very well, summarized, Naira. Thank you so much for highlighting both of the points. And yeah, that's actually going to be the key factor on how effectively how quickly we realize the transition is already happening, and how effectively we sort of try to make sure that every stakeholder is on board for that. So thank you so much for highlighting both of the points, so make them count. So coming to Irfan Saab, again, talking a bit on the battery side, but I mean, I'm not talking on the battery side, but perhaps how do we actually address the waste point that have been highlighted in the circular economy of the e-waste that could be potentially be generated? So perhaps any policy areas, and lastly, if you have any 2 pointers, but yeah, just in the interest of time, just a 3-minute response at maximum, and then we'll come to Akil Saab, and finally for concluding and final vote of thanks to Mahat Saab. Over to you, Irfan Saab.
Regarding EVs, there was a planning being done in IGCEP about 3 years ago that by 2030 we would require 5 gigawatts of more power. And NTDC was planning to deliver this power, and we told them not to do this. We'll do that from rooftop solar. That will be, everybody is doing that. So we should go for that. From low voltage network and rooftop solar, we don't require NTDC's intervention in night, in charging of the EVs. Number 2, somebody said about discos, that they will lose their business. If somebody is worried about discos, we shouldn't worry about their performance has been miserable. Almost all the discos, I'm saying almost because I want to be cautious, they have their liabilities more than their asset values now. So their performance has been miserable. The end user tariff includes 50% capacity charges, 25% discos losses, and 40% government taxes, including the TV fees. So if you want to make electricity affordable, it shouldn't be done through discos. It should be done through small-scale solars. Maximum level of distribution would be 11 kV. And we should go for mini grids, use of AI and IT, and avoid the banks by using blockchain. This is what we should plan for. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Irfan Saab, for these valuable. I fully agree. So Akil Saab, also, if you would like to sort of respond to any of the questions or any final suggestions from your end, and then we'll move towards the final closing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth. Very pertinent points mentioned by all the experts. I would say that going forward, especially in 2025, there are 4 or 5 things that are on the radar of the government, and which I personally also think which are the areas in which we need to work on in order to accelerate and pave the way for the energy transition. One of them is the rationalization of net metering regulations and scheme. The government has been supporting, especially we at PPIB have been supporting the net metering scheme, but still we believe that now is the time that it needs to be rationalized. The regulations need to be, there are certain aspects that need to be improved. Not only, I'm not just talking about reducing the rate of at which the consumers sell their electricity to the grid. But points like is the maximum, what should be the maximum allowed capacity of installation? Should we reduce it from 1.5 times of the sanctioned load or not? Should it remain the same? Things like that. So on the technical side, as well as the financial side, a revision is imminent. The other thing is that now is the time with the number of storage systems being utilized by the domestic consumers and also at the industry and the government thinking of adding battery energy storage at the grid level. There is a need for regulatory framework to cover the ancillary services and battery energy storage systems, which is missing from the NEPRA's regulatory framework. That needs to be, because once the CTBCM also comes into play, I think that question was also highlighted by PPIB at the hearing of the CTBCM test run report, that it doesn't account for the battery energy storage system at the time at right now, and it states something like that in 2 years' time the regulatory framework will be made. I think this is the right time that we need to pursue this regulatory framework. Then micro mini grids, especially with the participation of private sector, that's another area the government has its focus on. As Farhan rightly mentioned, that there is still a huge amount of population in Pakistan that is off grid, and electricity supply through the national grid is not possible. So microgrids, the regulations are already there, but we need to make some sustainable financial models, some commercial models with the intervention of and participation of private sector investment that are sustainable in the long run. Local manufacturers is another area. EDB did a wonderful job. They formulated a draft policy that was formulated last year, but I think that policy is still unapproved. The policy requires some tweaking. We at PPIB also provided the comments to EDB, but I think STPI can also play an important role and providing inputs, gathering inputs from all the industry experts and providing to engineering development board in order to further tweak that policy and make it more financially attractive for the investors, at the same time make it a sustainable one. Because it was rightly mentioned by one of the speakers that manufacturing of solar panels is not the ultimate target. There's we have inverters. Inverters can be made locally, and then battery energy storage systems. That's another area in which Pakistan can take the lead, and that would not only support the renewable energy installations in Pakistan, but large scale batteries and the EVs that can be supported through this intervention. So these are some of the areas I think which should be targeted in the future.
Thank you so much, Vakil Saab, extremely all well noted points. So yeah, just in interest of time, let me come to Ahad Nazeeb Saab for his, if he has any final interventions, and for formally concluding session as and his final word of thanks as well. So Ahad Saab, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. So just a point, and just saying what Dr. Khalid and Farhan were saying. I think if the economic case exists, then I think geopolitical interventions might not be that important. And of course, with and this is the case for every aspect of renewable energy. There is no one wants to do good. You have to create an economic case for that, and if the economic case exists, then automatically our system will be developed in a way to acquire that. So with this, I'd like to thank all the panelists. Keel Jafri Saab, he's my senior as well. Irfan Saab, I've known him for a very long time. He might know me uh, for a very long time because we used to follow him during our feat at the wind power. Naila from Agora, Farhan from Irina, Dr. Khalid. So all of you, thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll keep you updated on this report format. And I would request Ubaid that whenever we have the table of contents available, maybe we can also share with the group for a final look to take it forward. Because without the sort of buy-in from the stakeholders, it gets very difficult for us to go on with the research and the advocacy part. So with this, I'll thank everyone, especially the audience. There were a lot of people joining us as attendees today. So I'd like to thank all of them, and thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, Ji. Khuda Hafiz, everyone. Thank you.